This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 57. Welcome to the 57th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. If you've been enjoying the show, I would love it if you take a moment to leave a review and a rating on iTunes. It helps the show to move up in rankings so that more people can find it, and it also helps people to know what we do here on Fertility Friday Radio. I'd like to say a special thank you to all of the listeners who have left reviews already. I read all of your reviews, and I really appreciate you taking the time to let me know how I'm doing. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please stop by the show notes page and leave a comment. You'll find all the episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S, and on Twitter at Fertile Friday. And if you'd like to learn more about the fertility awareness method, along with a ton of other women who also want to learn the same thing, head over to the Fertility Friday Facebook group. So just go to fertilityfriday.com/community and you'll be redirected to the group. So today's episode is a special edition of the podcast. I have officially been podcasting for 1 full year. This podcast episode is going to be released on my anniversary. And I'm so excited about that. I can't believe it's been a whole year. So 57 episodes, at least 50 different guests, a ton of useful information. I've learned so much from my guests and so much from this whole process. And I'm so thankful for all of you who have been listening and supporting the show. I'm so thankful for all of my guests who have been so generous with their time and with their knowledge to share with us over all of these amazing episodes. I've received so many encouraging emails, so many great comments, and so much encouragement from all of you. And I really appreciate it so much. So in this episode, going to be a totally different format because my husband is going to be joining us to ask me some questions for once. And this will allow you to hear a little bit about what happens behind the scenes, what has been happening in our lives for the past year, and a lot of the takeaways that I've had for the past year. So yes, welcome to the show, husband.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I don't even know why I said it that way. I just always wanted to say that. Anyways.
So maybe you can introduce yourself.
Myself. I am Lisa's husband. Lisa of the Fertility Friday show. And
what's your name?
What's my name? Oh, my name is John Jack. Yes. 2 first names. I'm proud of it. And yes.
Okay.
That's me. So, to start off, you have this wonderful podcast that you've created. When did you originally start?
Well, I started the blog in July of 2014, and so I started banging out a bunch of articles. The blog writing has definitely slowed down over the past year because the podcast has taken over. And the podcast I started in December. So I believe it was around the 19th of December 2014 that I released my first 2 episodes.
Wait, yes, I think that is when... Was that when you decided to upgrade your MacBook?
Yeah, so I bought a new computer
Yeah.
because I needed to have the power and the ability to do it.
Right.
And I upgraded my website, which was an interesting experiment because I'm not a web designer, but I muddled through getting a theme and trying to sort it out just so that at least I'd have a proper platform to showcase the podcast. And I started doing interviews, I think in November, possibly October. So I had banked about 8 interviews and planned to release around that time. The first 2 interviews, I have to say, were so rough. So for anyone who's listened to the first few, I think that it's never... I think that it's just hard. I just had to rip it off like a Band-Aid because I was nervous and I edited those interviews so much, but I felt that the information was more important than me recording them over and over again until they were perfect. But in the first 2 episodes, I really wanted to put out an overview of the fertility awareness method, and just to get that out there to really set the foundation and the tone of what we'd be talking about for the duration of the podcast. And yeah, so I don't know if I would feel comfortable listening to the first couple episodes, because I feel like I've grown quite a bit and become much more comfortable with podcasting over the past year.
Okay. And I know you first started out with the blogging portion first. So what made you want to make that transition into podcasting?
Well, I felt that, well, for me, I had discovered podcasting, I guess, a bit later than everyone else in the world. And I know when we had our first son, I started listening to podcasts. I had some questions about different health concerns, and also I just found myself wanting to have, I guess, something to do when I was driving to work and all that kind of stuff. So I started listening to podcasts, and I found that it was just an awesome way to share information. And also, when I learned how relatively simple it is to start a radio show out of your basement, I was super excited about that. I thought, wait a minute, I can actually do this out of my basement. I thought it would be a really good way to share this information in a really accessible format. And also, I didn't think anyone else was doing this particular topic. And so that's what inspired me to start the podcast.
Okay. And also, in regards to the behind the scenes stuff, as you know, you provide all this wonderful information to your listeners. But before you do all that stuff, I'm sure there's certain things behind the scene that you have to do to prep yourself in order to provide this great source of information.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, mainly researching, finding guests for the show, setting up those interviews and those types of things. The actual podcast itself is usually not that time intensive. As the listeners know, each podcast episode is about an hour or so. So that's fairly straightforward. But, setting up interviews after the podcast is done, or after the podcast is recorded, that's when the real work starts, I guess you could say. I spend a lot of time doing minor editing. I don't even do major editing because I have a very basic understanding of how to do this editing stuff. But I do go through each episode and, clean it up a little bit. And so I find that takes a bit of time. And so behind the scenes, that kind of stuff is going on. And I usually try to batch record and have episodes recorded in advance just to make sure that I keep on the schedule. So I'm very proud of the fact that I've been able to keep to my weekly schedule. That was my goal, to have a weekly podcast episode. And I'm really also proud of just the quality. My guests have been really amazing, and I've been really fortunate and really blessed to just be able to access these amazing, mostly women. I think of all the interviews I've done, 2 men and the rest have been women. And it's such an amazing thing to be able to ask the author of the book you've always loved the questions that you never got to ask. So although there is work to be done behind the scenes, it doesn't really feel like work, as you know, because I'm always working on it in the evenings and things like that.
So that was your work ethics of putting stuff together. What about the behind the scenes stuff in regards to your interesting concoction stuff that you've been brewing up in our kitchen? Stuff that I don't even know the title, the name, or what it's supposed to do, but all I know is you say, well, it helps with fertility. And yeah, how about that?
Well, so I guess it's part of walking the talk. So a lot of the things that I focus on the Fertility Friday podcast and in the blog are things that I am actually putting into practice myself. So a lot of the things that we've talked about on the show are, focusing on improving, dietary choices and those types of things. So, focusing on eating locally raised animals free of hormones and antibiotics, for example, eating organic foods when possible, incorporating healthy fats and organ meats and those types of things. So I have to say I have the most supportive husband.
Supportive.
Thanks, Eddie. Because in addition to all the things I'm doing at the podcast, all of the things that I'm learning inform our choices in terms of what I'm feeding to our family and all those types of things. So I'm, going to the local store that sources meat, local meat from Ontario, because we live in Ontario, Canada. And I'm cooking up liver and putting it in spaghetti and, I'm doing all kinds of bone broths and all those types of things all the time. And last year, I started making sauerkraut. So I was fermenting things on the counter. And
See, I don't have a problem with the meat stuff, because I get it. It's meat, and you could camouflage it with seasonings and other stuff. But the stuff that sit in jars and they start to bubble, and for me, when things sit in warm temperatures, I feel they go bad. But you say, no, it's the bacteria culture evolves and turns into this specimen, and the specimen hugs the nutrients. I don't know. I just try to grasp whatever information that you're giving me, but I trust that it definitely has some benefits to our health.
Well, as many of the listeners know, I've struggled with my own challenges with respect to thyroid issues, painful periods, painful menstruation over the years. And so a lot of the changes that we have made as a family have affected all of us. So incorporating more healthy fats, incorporating healthier meats, eating lots of vegetables, having a relatively healthy diet. I know that's helped with both of us in terms of fertility and my menstrual cycle and all that kind of stuff, but also with your blood pressure.
Yeah, that's true.
Because at your young age, having the doctor tell you had high blood pressure, those types of things. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the having stuff rot on the counter, that's my current obsession, gut health. And so definitely look forward to more podcast episodes with a focus on gut health because of the important role it plays. But so that's where the question's coming from, because recently I actually found a source of raw milk locally. And I'd been looking for raw milk for a while. I was inspired after I interviewed Sally Fallon from the Weston Price Foundation, and she talked about all of the different sacred fertility foods. And so in addition to organ meats, in addition to eating lots of vegetables, but also nutrient-dense foods, she talked about eating eggs from hens, free range. She talked about the organ meats. She talked about fish and cod liver oil, and she talked about raw milk and how these foods, when coming from natural sources, have high levels of nutrition. So finally, I found a source of raw milk, and the first thing I did was I managed to get a hold of some kefir grains, and I started making kefir. And so I know you're a little so instead of just having the vegetables now rotting on the counter, I have milk as well in the cupboard with kefir grains. So all I can say is that I'm very adventurous, and I definitely implement the things that I learn. I don't just talk about it and listen to my wonderful guests. I actually go out and learn and try and I mean, as we'll talk about in future episodes of the show, gut health is so important. We all have about 6 pounds of healthy bacteria in our bodies, and some people would call the gut flora an organ. And so anything that we can do to support gut health and to maintain that balance of healthy bacteria in our guts is a good thing. And so I'm all about the kefir and the sauerkraut, and my next project is actually to try to make kombucha. So I'm actually going to go full throttle like I always do, experimenting with these things.
Joy. Oh, joy. That's awesome. No, I enjoy it. I enjoy some of it. I'm not gonna lie, some of it. It just needs to grow on me, and for me to actually look into and I guess absorb some of the information that you're sharing,
Yeah.
because it's a lot. It's a lot of information. I hear from food to vaginas to everything in fertility. I hear it all, so I just have to grab certain pieces and try to make sense of it, which I have been. I have been.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your openness to my ideas. I know
Yes.
it's so funny because you're so used to all of this stuff. And I remember when I was pregnant for the first time and I told you that I wanted to have a home birth with a midwife. And I remember the look on your face and the questions that you had about
That. Yeah. That was a bit much. I thought to myself, like, really? Is this what you want? Are you sure? And you were very gung ho about it. And so I was like, all right, well, we have to make sure that we have the right safety measures to make sure that everything is somewhat seamless. So I think my comfort was that we had to register to a local hospital just in case, because that was my major concern. Like, if, okay, we're at home, everything's smooth, midwife is here, she's supporting, she's ready to catch, and then all of a sudden, if there was a complication, what do we do?
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, the B plan was nice. And
Well, and I remember they had an information session, and when we went to that, it kind of eased your mind. But I think what I
Yeah.
appreciated about the whole situation is just your openness. So even though you're skeptical, you were still open. And so it kind of works the same way with all this other stuff. So even though you're kind of skeptical about some of the things, some of these new ideas, because you're right, it is a ton of information. When I get emails from people and when I talk to people about the podcast, they always say, even my guests, after we're done an interview, they'll say, wow, that was a ton of information in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
And as you know, as I always say, I'm like a super nerd. I love to read. I love to learn new information. And that is why the podcast is the way it is. That's why there's such a breadth of topics. And that's why I really try to draw out a lot of specific information that there's so much information out there that I feel people should know. I feel like if you're having fertility struggles or menstrual cycle issues, that you should be able to draw from all the tools that are available to you. And so I do appreciate how open you are to all of the different things, because it's almost like every month I come at you with something else. It's like, oh, by the way, this is what I'm going to try now.
Yes. Yes, I know. So bouncing back to the birth of our first one, how is it compared to the second? Because I'm not sure if you already told the majority of your listeners that you are a new mommy, and number two is fairly recent.
Well, so for any of the listeners who don't know, so at this point in time, I don't know when you'll be listening to this episode, but this episode will actually be airing on Christmas Day, so December 25th, 2015. So at this point in time, we have two children. One, our eldest son is 3 years old, and our baby is 3 months old. So it's been an incredibly busy year. And we had both of our sons at home. And I know I had questions from listeners wanting to hear a bit more about what that birth experience was like.
But before we even get into the birth experience, what about the personal prep? Because I know in comparison from number one to two was definitely a different preparation.
Well, that's, so true. I think probably for our first, before I became pregnant with our first child, you probably prepared more than I did, because I did not have the information. That's part of what informs and drives me to do this podcast, because I was just like anybody else. Before we became pregnant with our first child, I was just taking my prenatal vitamins, and, we were eating fairly healthy. I thought, just regular food. lots of vegetables. I always like vegetables, but I wasn't doing anything more than that. And I was eating more of a typical diet. I ate a lot of pizza when I was pregnant with our first son. I was like, and looking back, it was, I'm guessing that because pizza has lots of cheese on it, I bet that my body was just starving for healthy fat.
Yeah.
Because it was literally like I was craving like pizza and I don't know, candy, but that's a whole other story. So before I became pregnant with our first child, I had a miscarriage really early on. I think I've mentioned that on the podcast a couple times. So the first time we got pregnant, it was really like bittersweet. I was charting my cycles, so I knew exactly when we should be trying. And to my surprise, it actually took a couple months for us to get pregnant. I remember we started trying maybe in like November or something like that. And then I got pregnant in February. So even that surprised me because I know exactly when to try. So we were, trying on the exact days. I would tell you like, okay, I'm fertile today. And so, I mean, I'd be curious to know how that experience was for you because there's no like mystery if I tell you, look, by the way, today I have cervical mucus. So
yeah, because then I'm just trying to remember back because it was a while ago. I believe there was a cream you used to apply.
A cream?
Progesterone.
Oh, right. Yeah, because I was trying to regulate my menstrual. That's right.
Yes.
I was trying to regulate my menstrual cycle. You had found this really great doctor in the Toronto area that talked about fertility and stuff like that.
Right.
And so that's the approach I was trying. And it was, so he told me to apply the progesterone in my post-ovulatory phase. So yeah, I was taking like, you're right. I kind of forgot about that.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I was trying to prepare, but I was trying to get my menstrual cycle healthy, but I was doing it in a different type of way. Like I was going to this doctor and basically he recommended progesterone cream and he recommended a ton of supplements. He recommended like coenzyme Q10 and this EstroSense stuff. People may have heard of EstroSense. You could Google it. It's a supplement, but it was a different approach because it wasn't an approach that was informed by like dietary changes. It was very much like take these supplements and take the progesterone cream. And I remember it didn't really affect my menstrual cycle. I really thought that if I put on this cream that it would just like regulate my cycle, make it shorter because my cycles were always a bit longer, but it didn't really work. And yeah, so I got pregnant and I remember I didn't actually pee on a stick, so I didn't actually take the test until a week after my period, what should have come, because I knew I was pregnant, because that's the thing about fertility awareness. But it was the first pregnancy, so I actually waited a week. And I remember, so I peed on a stick and I told you that we were pregnant and we were so happy and we had this wonderful moment. And then literally the next day I started bleeding. So it was pretty like... I'm sure you remember that too.
That's right.
Because we had this really special like moment, and then literally it was the next day I started bleeding, and it was like the worst pain ever. Well, not ever now that I've actually gone through labor, but it was really bad. It was actually a really painful physically experience. And then it was an interesting experience. I've talked about that a bit on the podcast, going to the doctor, because since I had been charting my cycles, I knew when I had ovulated, but my doctor didn't really see it that way. And so we had a little bit conversation about that because he thought I was further along than I was because when my period started, and I tried to explain to him that I ovulated on day 21 and he didn't understand what I meant.
Yes. I do remember this.
But then, and I spoke to him about it and I asked him if we should be waiting before we started trying, and he said no. So basically we actually conceived then the next cycle. So I had my miscarriage and then I ovulated and then I was pregnant. And so there was no menstruation in between that. I just got pregnant on my next cycle. So I've learned a lot since then.
Right. So from all of that, from that journey to this one, what did this one look like?
Well, this pregnancy was totally different. I mean, in addition to the preparation technically you could say that I've been preparing for our second pregnancy for like 2 years.
Yeah.
because after we had our son, we had some challenges. He was colicky. He was, for the first 3 months, was extremely challenging for us. He wasn't super settled or relaxed. He was pretty trying at times. And, that's kind of when I started on my journey to try to just make our family more healthy. I think a lot of moms fall into this category when our son had eczema, when he was really small.
Yeah.
And there was a few things that were kind of, and of course, as new parents, everything's this huge deal. So everything kind of freaked us out, and we were going to the pediatrician and this and that. So I think all of those things really informed my journey. Like, those are the things that really got us started into this journey of food and health and all the different science experiments that I'm carrying out in the kitchen, because it all came from a place of wanting to provide the best nutrition for our family, to try to help, because I've never been a person that wants to take a bunch of pills, and neither have you.
No.
And so
No, not a fan.
not at all, because the doctor gave you pills for your blood pressure. You didn't take them, to my chagrin. And so that made me feel like, okay, no, we got to find some way to just keep our family healthy without having to go and take a bunch of pills.
No, a pill should not make you pee like 6 times in a row. That's not normal.
Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about your blood pressure pill experience.
Yes,
Side note.
Blood pressure experience. Let's see. Went to the doctor, said that it is way too high, and due to the fact because it's on both sides, both father and mother, so that makes me hyper.
Tensive?
Yeah, hypertensive. So at that point, he was like, well, we have to prescribe you this medication. So I was like, all right, so I'm not going to take it. But he's like, no, take it, because at least take it so you could regulate it. And then from there, we can manage it. I said, well, if I take it and I stop taking it, and he said, whoa, you can't just stop taking it. I was like, but you said when I take it, then we could monitor it and regulate it. He's like, well, it'll take some time, but keep in mind, if it stays high, once you take this, you have to take this forever. So when I hear stuff like that, I'm really rebellious. So I was like, how about no? So, but then I got a little bit scared, because at one point it was really high, and I was feeling extremely fatigued and all that stuff. So I took it. And what it was doing to me, I was going to the bathroom and it was causing me to pass out, which was weird, because I would sit on the couch, I'd take it, I'm like, I feel really tired or dizzy, and I'm out. I'll wake up probably 2 hours, 3 hours later, and I was like, okay, enough of this, because I think I had to take that, and also I was taking some form of anti-inflammatory. So I was like, no, we need to figure this out. So I did the gym thing.
Yeah.
I did the gym thing, but keep in mind, yes, you can go to the gym and jump on some form of a cardio machine, but that is a fraction of what you need to do in order to keep your blood pressure down. I wasn't really focusing on the dietary concerns.
Yeah.
And I was working out, but even though my eating was better, it wasn't great. I would still kind of reoffend and go somewhere and help myself to some fried goodness and kind of reset things. So yeah, that was pretty much my journey.
Well, and see, those types of things, like, those things motivate me, like having our son having eczema and not getting it, not knowing why, and for you, knowing you, because I know you and I know you're not going to take your medication. So here I am thinking like, oh my God, he's going to drop dead. So that's super motivation for me. So yeah, so then I kind of started on my journey of learning more, and that's kind of where this all started. So in terms of what was different from pregnancy preparation for baby number 1 versus baby number 2, now I have a much more rounded view about what it really takes to build a human, to build a tiny human.
Yeah.
And so during that time, I did have some of my own health challenges. And what I've said it before, I've said it many times on the podcast, but I feel like when you have a baby, it takes a lot out of you, like literally, metaphorically, emotionally, but also quite literally. In addition to being tired just because you're up with the baby, in order to build a tiny human, that takes a lot of nutrients, energy. And I remember the doctor saying to me, because I remember asking, like, do I have to worry if my baby's going to get enough nutrition? And my doctor said, well, if your baby doesn't have enough, they'll just take it from you. And I really felt depleted after we had our son. And I think the interviews I've done, especially the interview, like I had mentioned with Sally Fallon from Weston A. Price, she talks about that a lot, and how in traditional cultures, they would wait and they would space their children about 3-4 years between each child to allow the time to build up your nutrient stores. And so armed with that information this time, I've been serving up the organ meats. I've been eating my liver. I've always had low iron levels. And I mentioned that after incorporating liver, and I buy the kidneys and the heart. I bought all kinds of things into the house.
Well, you did take the thyroid.
Well, the thyroid medication is for the hypothyroid. But I was taking, before I used to take the iron pills. So I take the ferritin or whatever. But it never really it just never changed my iron levels. So in terms of preparation for the second baby, we were eating lots of vegetables as usual, eating not everything organic because we don't have access to everything organic, but just eating lots of vegetables, organic when possible. I was eating lots of fermented vegetables and, getting kefir from, there's local farms that sell kefir. So trying to incorporate probiotics, trying to incorporate organ meats, trying to incorporate cod liver oil, trying to eat lots of vegetables, lots of fresh fruits, those types of things. And, getting exercise and trying to sleep in darkness, have a good sleep environment. And so, there's lots of things that I did differently this time that I did not do the first time because I just was not aware of the profound impact that diet could have. And also switching up the oils. So we used to cook with different vegetable oils, and I've talked about that before as well. So one of the things I focused on too is getting enough healthy fats. And I found that all of these changes that I made, I've been charting my cycles for 13, 14 years now. And after we had our son, our eldest son, and after my menstrual cycles actually came back, they were totally different than they have ever been. So all of those changes that I made stabilized my menstrual cycles, made them more, instead of having longer cycles and making them more in line with the normal range, healthy cervical mucus production, a lot more healthy than it ever was. So I saw the changes in my menstrual cycle. And then when we were ready to try for baby number 2, it was different. We conceived the first month we tried, and both pregnancies were similar. I don't have difficult pregnancies. I think as a woman, not having difficult pregnancies, I think you feel guilty to some extent because some women have such a rough time.
Stories, right?
Some women have tons of morning sickness. So I both pregnancies, I didn't have any morning sickness. I really didn't have anything to complain about at all.
It was only with our second, I think closer towards the due date, there was just a little bit more discomfort.
Yeah, just minor stuff.
Minor stuff. Nothing.
But yeah, a little bit more discomfort. But
yeah, in all, it was good. It was a smooth sailing.
So I know some of the listeners were asking about or wanting to know more about the birth experience because I did do a couple episodes? I did an episode with Sarah Maloney, who is a birth doula, and I did an episode with Saskia Roll. And in both of those episodes, we talked a lot about birthing and the concept of hypnobirthing and the role of a doula and all that kind of stuff. And so for any of the listeners who don't know, both of my births were home births.
That's right.
As we talked about. And so home birth, for anyone who, I don't know how it works in different areas of the world, but we live in Canada. So when you have a home birth, I'm able to do that because I was able to have a midwife at my birth, and I'm really fortunate to live in a place where midwives are covered. So I don't have to pay out of my pocket because the midwife is actually covered under our health care plan. And so provided that your pregnancy is identified as low risk, and provided that, everything's going fine and there's no risk factors, and I think you have to get past the 37-week mark in order to deliver your baby at home, but provided all things are go, then you can go right ahead and deliver your baby at home. So with both of our sons, I did have babies at home, and I know a lot of people, when I say I'm having the baby at home, people kind of get that scared look on their face, and how could you do that? And
what was it like for you? Because I know what it was like for me, because I was definitely there. And, I am, of course, looking from the window from outside in, and you're presently there. What was that like for you in both scenarios?
Well, the first, when we had our eldest son, so as you know, he was born the day after my birthday. So I think it kind of worked out. So I had the first time around, we took all these different classes. So we took prenatal classes, we took hypnobirthing class.
Yes.
And in case any of you haven't heard of hypnobirthing, it sounds really wonky and weird, but really it's kind of like intense yoga breathing, if anyone has ever done yoga or meditation. And it's just a way to really focus and not get freaked out when you have contractions. So I found that to be really helpful. I felt prepared because I had something to do during my contractions and hypnobirthing language surges. So the thing is that because our first son was born the day after my birthday, we had people over. It was really big. So I was able to I was kind of distracted. I didn't really know I was in labor. My water didn't break. I think it probably broke maybe minutes before he was born. So I didn't even really know I was in labor the first time. In retrospect, I had my first contraction in the morning, and then they built up to the point that the contractions were really, really strong in the evening, and we still had people over.
Right.
And so I was kind of breathing through those, and I don't know, but I was able to, no one really knew I was in labor. And then our friends left at about 2 a.m, and our son was born at about 7 a.m. So, but I mean, ultimately the experience, it's intense. I did feel it. People, I know that there's a lot of, if you Google hypnobirthing or look up hypnobirthing on YouTube, you see all these women and they swear that they didn't feel anything or whatever. So I'm not one of them. I felt it. But what I always say about labor is that labor has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so it's really intense. But the way the contractions are, it's that they come and then you have like a break between them. So even though there is pain and all that kind of stuff, like even though it's really intense, I still felt like it was such a special and amazing and powerful moment. And it was really nice to be at home. And it was really nice after both sons, but after they were born. So the first time we did it after he was born, we were already at home. I was able just to transfer to our bed and relax there. And the midwife took care of everything. And it was really private. What I really liked was that there wasn't a bunch of people around and there weren't people coming in and out. Like I was just kind of we were just able to have that moment as a family, basically.
Right.
The first time was a lot more stressful for you, though.
Oh, no, it was a lot more stressful. Definitely a lot more, because it was just not knowing all the appropriate steps to take. From running up and down the stairs to make sure that the birthing pool had warm water, boiling water on the stove and boiling it in the kettle, and trying to balance all the stuff. Yeah, it was a little bit chaotic.
But then I felt like with the birth of our youngest son this time, we were like a well-oiled machine. So we both knew exactly what to expect. I found this time the midwife, she came, she did the home visit. We figured out where everything was going to go. She talked to me about what to expect, and she told me a lot of interesting things about birth. And so according to the midwife, the labor part went quickly. Like, it doesn't feel quick in the moment, but I guess it was quick. And so she really prepared me for the fact that it could go really quick this second time.
Right.
And so she had protocols in place. She told me when to call. So I felt quite confident in doing that. And all I can say is that with my second birth experience, it came on super strong, like super intense from the start. And it was like, it happened so fast. I just feel like it happened in the moment it didn't feel fast, but I'm pretty sure that my contractions started at like 5 p.m. and he was born at like 2 a.m.
Right. Isn't that the thing though? Isn't that what
that's what people say, yeah.
We've heard before that the second one will come much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's everyone's experience, but I think that's generally what they say. But it happened for us. But it was just so kind of seamless. Like, you were just, yeah, again, you were amazing. You were like my rock. So I didn't need a doula because I had you. You were my doula. But yeah, and having gone through the experience of having a baby at home, I wouldn't, if I could help it, I wouldn't have the experience in the hospital, just because I really enjoyed having kind of that personal experience, having it at home, having it in private. The midwives were amazing, and they took care of everything we needed. And then they came to the home to visit. There's a schedule of when they do their visits, so they come, the next day or something like 2 days after, and they come a few times. So you just had the baby, or at home, you don't have to go anywhere. They come, they check the baby, they weigh the baby, problems with breastfeeding, they're there, and they provide referrals. So I had a really just amazing experience. I loved the midwives. And
yeah, I think that's, to me, that was a nice touch in regards to the follow-ups.
Yeah.
Because and they kind of know you best, because they've been through the whole process.
Well, and when you're seeing them, just like when you have an OB, like you have your monthly visits, but I think with the midwives, the visits are a little bit longer. I think part of it is just feeling like you're being heard and feeling like you're more of a person and you're getting that personal touch. But yeah, like all the experience of it was really good. And as I said before, my theory of labor is that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's so much focus on the labor and so much fear around it. And I always joke that after the baby's born, your labor is over. The labor once it's over, but then you have a baby and you don't know what challenges you might have after that. So you might have challenges breastfeeding. I know I had significant challenges breastfeeding the first time. That lasts for weeks and months sometimes. And you can have challenges with your baby, whether your baby's going to sleep or not. And that's something that can last for years. So it's so interesting that we focus on labor in particular as being this big scary thing, when once it's over, it's over. And then you have a child, and any issues that you might face could last for years.
Right. Yeah. And I'm assuming not everyone has that seamless type of outcome all the time.
But I think part of it is there's a lot of information out there and a lot of hype and a lot of, like, I always joke that the way that the labor scenes on TV were, mine was not anything like that. Like, I remember joking that on TV, like, you'd see the nurse and the woman be laying in the bed with her legs up, and she'd be doing her Lamaze, like, and then the doctor would be like, don't push, and she'd be like, okay, and then finally they'd be like, okay, push, and she'd be like, ah, and she'd push. And I always joke that my experience wasn't like that. Like, I didn't have any control over this pushing business. My body was just like pushing, and I wasn't consenting. And anyways, but so it didn't look like anything that it experienced. But with that being said, this whole idea that women can't do it and that it's just too hard and it's too painful. I'm not going to say it doesn't hurt, but I'm just going to say that, like, your body is designed to do this whole labor thing. So,
right. And I think what you said before is, I think we forget that before the more modern style of, I guess, um, Medicare was implemented, people had children at home.
That was the only option.
That's the only option you had. You had no other option, and they were fine. They were fine. They had multiple kids at home. So
I'm pretty sure both my parents were born at home.
right. So yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking to your grandmother
Yes.
the other day, and she said that, how many children did your grandmother have?
6.
And all but one were born at home. I remember she said that.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. So that was our birth. That was our birth experience. Oh, and just one last question for you about the birth experience.
Mm-hmm.
So coming from a place of skepticism and probably intense terror about this whole having baby at home thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then having gone through it twice now, what was that like for you?
Not for me. I just the second time around was just much better. Setting up that whole birthing pool thing was funny because it was actually the practice run, and it no longer was a practice run because it actually happened, which was really cool. So no, it was good. It was good. Of course, I could say that I was comfortable because I wasn't going through the pain, but I think I had a better lens of how to support you more, and just knowing when to come in, when to back off, all that type of stuff. Because I know with the first one, I was just like all over it. I was like, okay, what now? And like you almost pulled me into the tub with you. And I was just like, no, I don't want to go in that water. But yeah, but yeah. And the first time it was a shock to my system. I was buzzing. I think after our first little one was born, I was still buzzing for like a good month.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for a month.
You're traumatized? Were you traumatized?
I was really. I don't know if I was being traumatized or just like, did that really happen in this house? Yeah, I just kept on thinking, did that really just happen here? And just thinking back of the whole sequence and the whole current of events, it was something else. But for the second one, no, like my mind was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to do this. And I just had a weird calm about me.
You did, yeah.
It was weird. Like I was feeling anxious up until the time because I was helping my cousin move, and then you called me and you're just like, yeah, do you think you'd come home if you're done because we might have a baby? I was like, what? So I flew home, and then I was anxious from that point. But then once. It was weird. Once everything was set up, we saw everything was placed, I was like, okay, no, this is good. This could work. And then, then I was calm, and I was like, yeah, the more calm I am will reflect how you feel also, right? And it was good. It was amazing.
Yeah, profound.
Right? Mm-hmm. So with all this information, your journey, people you've had wonderful discussions with, what do you want people to know about fertility?
Well, I think one of the things I want people to know is that although we are all made to believe that it just happens, and even though that's still our experience, we all know people that just get pregnant at the drop of a dime. I want people to know that there's more to it than that. Our fertility is entwined with our health. So in order to have a baby, you need to have a healthy body, and not just you. So you have to be healthy. Your partner has to be healthy, because it's not just about getting pregnant. It's also about having healthy babies. Unfortunately, I think that in our culture, it's very focused on this whole goal, accomplishment. Let's get pregnant, instead of really focusing on being healthy first and really, really striving to have a healthy child. Because obviously everything isn't within our control. Right. And there's no such thing as perfection. I don't think that's the point. But for me, what I wish I had known before we had started trying, we talk about this a lot, is just I wish if we had known then what we knew now about diet, about health, about exercise, just about all of the things, we would have been doing those things before.
Of course.
We talked just the
Of
other
course.
day, we were talking about how, because I remember you had that on your radar, and I hadn't even gone down my crazy train yet. You had cleaned up your diet a bit, dialed back on the drinking, all that kind of stuff in
Yeah,
preparation
absolutely.
before we were trying.
Hmm.
And so it was on your radar. And it was on my radar too. I mean, I also, I stopped having my glass of wine at night and stuff like that, knowing that we were about to try. But that's merely scratching the surface. So one of the
Yeah.
things that I wish, or not wish, one of the things that I'm working towards kind of informing, and one of the reasons that I do the show, is to really just put that idea out there that when it comes to fertility and when you're wanting to try to have a baby, it's more than just, going off the pill on Thursday and popping a couple prenatals. Like, you can do a lot. You can take a bit of time beforehand. And I think that in a perfect world, and I know the world isn't perfect, but in a perfect world, you would really look to taking that like at least 3 to 6 months, preferably a year ahead of time, and really focusing on the nutrition that you need to build a baby, because you're building a tiny human.
Right.
And all of those, their skin, their nails, their hair, their brain, it all comes from what you eat.
And would you say that
It's crazy.
it would be economically feasible for every level of person to achieve this?
Well, I don't think it's about perfection. I think it's about really just focusing. I mean, we all have to eat.
Right.
So,
But good food, or organic food in quotation.
but it doesn't have to
It
be.
doesn't have to be.
I don't think that the thing is like having this perfect. I think that gets to a point of neurotic. I
Right.
don't think that we need to be neurotic about it and be so scared to like eat anything wrong.
Right.
But I think what it comes down to is more focusing on the real food. We all know that our vegetables, eating our fruits and veggies are important, but I think that to whatever extent that your budget allows, it's important to eat real food.
Right.
So, focusing on things that are not processed, not packaged, really learning about your fats and understanding that your baby's brain is made of fat. You need to, cholesterol makes up a huge part of our brain. Fish oils, omega-3s, like there's so many things that the baby needs for development. And so really trying to get those things into your diet, I think that's super important. And since we have to eat anyways, you may as well try to eat the right things. And I think when women are trying to get pregnant, that's the time when they're most motivated. Like I've seen women stop smoking on a dime after peeing on a stick and seeing that they're pregnant. So there's no better time in a woman's life when she's more motivated to do these things. The only problem is that we all think that we are doing them already, because the only thing that we're ever told to do is to go on a prenatal. And so, if anyone's listening for the first time, if this is the first episode that you're hearing by some random fluke, then go over to the show notes page, so fertilityfriday.com/57, and I will link some of the episodes that really speak to fertility foods, preparation for pregnancy, what to do after going off of the pill, and how to prepare your body. Because I think a lot of women don't know that the birth control pill or any other hormonal contraceptive depletes your body of hormones that you need to get pregnant. It depletes your body of folic acid and folate and B12 and those types of things. And you get off of that and immediately get pregnant with vitamin deficiencies anyways. And there's no way that after your body spits out a baby, you're not going to have vitamin deficiencies after that. So these are things that people don't know.
So, with all these wonderful people that you've had fantastic interviews with, they provided you with just great pieces of information. Is there something that I should say surprised you when you were talking to one of your guests that you're just like, what did you say? Especially in regards to fertility. Like they said something and you're like, I did not know that.
Oh, that's happened so many times, to be honest. I can think of one of the first interviews I did with Dr. Laura Bryden when I asked her what is the most common side effect that she sees in her practice from being on the birth control pill. And she said depression.
Mm.
And I would have thought that it would have been something to do with infertility or, your period not coming back or something like that. But she said depression. And that really led to me exploring that. Like I explored that in the podcast. I had an interview with Holly Grigg Spall, and we talked all about how the birth control pill affects your mood and
Right.
your libido. And that was really surprising. I think also the interview that I did with Dr. Rosita Arvigo, that was a really kind of profound shift for me because I had posted up a link on my Facebook page, on the Fertility Friday page, and about vaginal steaming. So there was that whole thing where
Yes,
Gwyneth,
the good old vaginal steaming.
yeah.
Awesomeness.
But Gwyneth Paltrow had like tweeted or something about how she does her vaginal steams, and I actually thought that sounded kind of weird. I was like, "What's that about? That's bizarre. Who steams their vagina?" Because I had never heard of it before, and so the concept of it seemed very strange. And then I posted up this article, and I think I said something like, "Well, I don't think I'll be steaming my vagina anytime soon." Ha ha ha. And then one of my wonderful listeners actually commented that it was a thing, and she linked me to this video of Dr. Rosita Arvigo, and I was floored. And I thought to myself, wow, like you just don't know
How does someone
what you don't
know that information? Like me hearing that, I was laughing hard because I was like steaming. Me just thinking steaming your vagina because I think of when we use that thing to steam our clothes. And I'm like, that thing is hot. That thing is dangerously hot, lava hot. And I'm thinking, if you hold that to your hot spot or to your midsection, you're screaming. That's not enjoyable. That's insane. And it's weird because actually I thought about it, and I was like, I was actually steaming the clothes. And I thought I wasn't gonna put it there. I thought about it, but then I was like, no, that's crazy. That's too hot. So yes,
That is, oh my goodness, out of control. But yes, so that actually led me to discover Arvigo therapy. And honestly, when I interviewed Dr. Rosita Arvigo, so again, I've said this so many times and I have to say it again, like I'm just so grateful that I was able to interview her. She is such an inspiration. She has been working in this field for 30 or 40 years, and she really opened my eyes to a whole different way of caring for menstrual cycle irregularities and different issues. So when she talked about the vaginal steam or the uterine lavage, and she talked about how it's not taking the clothes steamer and putting it on your vulva, but she talked about how, you boil the tea and you use the herbs and you let the water cool down and you sit. And she talked about how it actually, the steam goes up through your vagina into your uterus and loosens the blood and those types of things that dry and don't properly evacuate when you have your menstruation, and how just that in and of itself can help to reduce menstrual cramping, reduce pain, and help with all kinds of things. And the way that she described it, I thought was so profound. And then when she went into the Arvigo therapy, which is the physical massage, I've talked about that so much since I've learned about that on the show, and just how profound and simple, profound yet simple, the concept is that if your uterus is out of alignment, if the fallopian tube is out of alignment, or if you have if your uterus is in a certain position and your menstrual blood isn't able to properly clear out each time you have a menstrual cycle, just by correcting those basic things, by doing the uterine the therapy to correct the alignment issues, those types of things, how profound an impact it can have on fertility, it can have on menstrual pain, it can have on all these types of things. I mean, that has to be one of the moments. And it's not just for me, because I've had a number of emails from listeners who have heard the podcast regarding Arvigo therapy, Mercier therapy, which is also very similar in theory, and having actually gone out and sought an Arvigo practitioner or Mercier therapy practitioner and had amazing results for themselves. So in addition to me learning this information and opening up my eyes, it's also opening up the eyes of the listeners and really just giving women choices, things that, because I am not the only one that did not know about art Vigo therapy.
Right, right. And with that being said, once again, with all those wonderful people that you had interviews with, was there anyone that actually shifted your way of thinking?
I know that, like, there's certain interviews, I guess, that stand out in terms of that kind of stuff. Like, when I was talking to Holly Griggsball, in addition to reading her book, like in her book, if you haven't read Sweetening the Pill or How We Got Hooked on Hormonal Birth Control, how she talked about the emotional side of it, really, that I'm bringing it up again because that was a whole different thing. It's tragic that women are taking a birth control pill or some sort of hormonal contraceptive. There were examples of women who would go on these hormonal contraceptives. One woman was on a progesterone only pill, and another, all these other women were on Yaz, so hormonal contraceptive. Yeah. And so they're on this pill and they're experiencing all this emotional stuff, like anxiety, like those crazy thoughts. Like one of the examples was like, you know, your boyfriend or your partner doesn't call you and you have this whole crazy train in your head about how they're this and that and they don't love me anymore, and that kind of anxiety, crazy stuff. And you think you're just a little bit nutty, but it turns out Holly was talking about how she went on a forum of women who also took Yaz, and all of these events were eerily similar. That really struck me, that because most women would never think it's the pill, because the pill and the hormonal contraceptives are so, it's just such an everyday little thing. You're just taking this little pill every day. You would never think that it would cause that type of stress and that type of emotional turmoil. And no one really tells you about the emotional side of it. So you're taking this pill and you don't even know that that could happen. So it's not even on your radar to look for that. There was an example in that book coming off, or no, sorry. The pill is called, or the book is called The Pill, Is It For You? And in that book, there was an example, and this woman, she went on a progesterone only pill, and same thing, like she just started having all these crazy thoughts and reactions, all that kind of stuff. And eventually she went back to the doctor, and one of the nurses said like, oh wow, you haven't like lost it yet, or whatever it was, because it was like this common thing. Anyways, so I think those were some of the moments for me, like the moment, the interview with Holly Griggsball and talking about the emotional side effects of the pill that no one talks about.
And I guess they don't have it within the side effects of when you receive this medication. I wonder if it's listed like as one of the things that is a possibility.
It could be. But I mean, they also list blood clots and like stroke and stuff, and no one thinks they're gonna,
and all that stuff. Yeah.
No one thinks they're gonna have a stroke.
Right.
No one thinks it applies to them. Someone else is gonna have a stroke, not me.
Because people have been taking this pill for years. So, right. It's just one of those things. So what is your vision? What is your future planning? Where do you want to take this?
Well, the plans for the future, I won't spill every single bean that I have planned.
Spill it.
But I started this podcast with the hope of basically finding out if this is something that women want, if this is knowledge and information. Because I know for me, learning about the menstrual cycle and learning about how my fertility works has had a profound impact on my life. It has changed everything, and it has given me the power to make so many decisions that maybe I wouldn't have had the power to make. When you are able to identify when you're fertile, when you're not, you're able to make decisions about birth control without being afraid that the pill is the only option. So I started this podcast with the intention of just sharing this information, the information that should be available, the information we all should have learned in junior high, and then some. and really finding out if there's a community of women who are also interested in this. And so after a year of podcasting and releasing all these episodes, the podcast is starting to get some traction. I'm edging up to 10,000 podcast downloads a month, and that is incredible that there are so many people listening to my voice.
How much people would that be?
I have no idea.
10,000?
No, it's not 10,000 people, but who knows?
What if it is? Wow.
But the podcast to date has been downloaded over 60,000 times, which is just insane.
Really
so obviously, and it's starting to build, and so I'm starting to get more emails from people. I'm starting to get more comments, more interaction, more questions, and
so what has the reception been like? So
it's been so like on the US iTunes, I'm pretty sure I have something like 23 5-star reviews. And so far, it has been overwhelmingly positive. I really haven't received any negative feedback that has really stuck with me. I mean, a few suggestions, of course, but overall, the feedback has been like, thank you so much for sharing this information. I really appreciate that you are doing this. And even personal stories, which have been so touching and amazing to hear. Women who've reached out to me to say that because of something they listened to in the podcast, it inspired them to, go out and seek assistance from, naturopath or an Vigo therapy practitioner, like we talked about, or a fertility awareness educator, or whatever it is, and just really feeling hopeful, especially because many of these women just have been looking for answers, but haven't really found those answers. And not that they found every answer from the podcast, but that it's really given them hope because it's just provided so much more information. So the reception has been really, really good. And that's so encouraging for me. It really just has solidified that whole idea of mine that this is information that women need to know. Once you learn the fertility awareness method and you kind of learn how your body works, you can't go backwards. So you can't even imagine not knowing. So having the ability to share that with women on this platform is just it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to do so. And so my plan for the future is to continue doing this and to continue finding amazing guests and sharing lots of amazing information, just to really motivate, to inspire, and to empower women to be able to take control and charge of their own bodies, of their own fertility, of their own menstrual cycles, of their own birth control, and to really just put the power back in our hands to determine what's best for us. Obviously, that's why I'm going with this. And in terms of what I've been doing, I've restarted my training through Justice. So I've talked a lot about Justice on the podcast. That was where I got my start in my initial training. So I am officially in the Holistic Reproductive Health Practitioner Training Program. And I'm working towards completing that. And I am planning to release my own fertility awareness teaching program, education program, so that I can help women to learn the fertility awareness method as well. So there's a lot of things in the works for 2016 and the years to come. I just want to be able to really inspire and empower my listeners to take this knowledge wherever they want to take it.
So that was going to be one of my last two questions. The question was, what is your purpose?
What is my purpose?
So you kind of
Getting
answered
all
that, but
deep
you could,
on me.
Yeah, no, you kind of answered it in there in that last part there.
Well, see, I believe my purpose is I've always been inspired by issues that are pertinent to women's health, women's reproductive freedoms. As many of the listeners know, I worked many years in the field of sexual assault education awareness. So I've always been inspired and driven to work in areas that affect women's health and women's sexuality and women's fertility and those types of things. And so I believe that my purpose is to use my voice to share and inspire, and to use my inner nerd for the greater good. Yes. Because, I mean, not everyone enjoys like reading all these books and reading scientific studies and all that kind of stuff. Like
I don't.
a lot of people don't enjoy that.
Yeah.
Or listening to, podcasts and
Yeah.
reading and all kinds of stuff. And for me, I do. I love it. I love learning. I love reading. I love doing, you could call them science experiments. Like when I learn new information, I take it and I run with it. So whether it's making kefir or whether it's podcasting or whether it's fertility awareness. I mean, I was the person who, when I first started learning fertility awareness, there was a group of women who were doing weekly sessions or monthly sessions, I should say. And I just kept showing up. And so now it's like 10 years later and now I have a podcast about it. So I obviously take everything to the nth degree. And
everything is purposeful.
yeah, it is. And so I believe that's a big part of my purpose, because when I think about the impact that I have already made with this podcast, but that I could make in women's lives, this matters. It's so important because a lot of women out there want to have babies, want to have healthy babies. So many women are struggling to get pregnant, struggling with their fertility, struggling with painful menstruation, struggling with absent menstruation, like they don't even know where their periods went. And this is becoming a more and more common issue. And it breaks my heart when I see people in my own life that are struggling with these issues. And so if there's anything that I can do to empower women to really take charge of their own health and their fertility, then that must be my purpose.
Fantastic. And last but not really least, actually, yeah, it is last. So who is Lisa?
What? Who is Lisa? Well, yesterday I referred to myself as a hippie.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting all profound and deep on me? Well, I'm just a regular girl who really believes in something and just wants to share it. One of the things I've said a few times, on the show is that I got to a point in my life where there's certain information I could take for granted. I've had a few guests on the show, specifically Carrie Hampton and more recently Joy DeFelice. And when they were talking about the fertility awareness method, they would say something along the lines of, when a woman really knows her cycle, she doesn't have to write stuff down every single day to know where she is on her cycle. She'll just know. And so I'm kind of like that now after all these years. Like I still have to mark things down if I want to remember in retrospect when I saw the fluid, like you still have to write down, but I know. And then when I see women struggling, I realize that is not normal. Most women don't know. And yeah, so I'm a person who really I just want people to be healthy. I want women who want to have babies to be able to have babies. I want to challenge that status quo. I want to challenge all those common ideas. Like I want people to know that when you go into the body shop and buy all that strawberry smelling stuff, it's screwing around with your hormones. I want people to know the reason why they're having difficulties. So I guess I'm just this passionate, driven woman who feels so strongly about so many different things and just really wants to inspire and inspire and empower others to do the same. I don't just want to learn what I learn and sit under a rock and know stuff. I want to share what I know and I want to learn more. And I follow my curiosity and it leads me to all kinds of crazy places.
Yes.
And that's just how I am. I think that I'm curious about everything. I'm curious about how things work. I'm curious about why things are. And I absolutely am not okay just to accept the status quo. I just believe that there's more than one way. I believe that there's more out there. There's so much more that we don't know. And so it's hard to answer a question like, who is Lisa? But I hope that has given you some insight.
Yes. No. Yes. All of that. Absolutely.
I also like to dance.
Yes.
And I also like to, to be silly and to have fun and
absolutely.
It's not all podcast and work and vaginas. I also have other interests
Yes.
other than vaginas.
Fantastic. Well, my dear, this was absolutely amazing. I am definitely impressed by you being the advocate of the womb. And I believe that you're doing fantastic work. And I think, I know with all of your efforts in trying to inform people that it's going to heal people at the same time, right? And healing's really is just a wonderful thing to share with people, especially when it's done so organically. You know, you're gathering information because you're so interested, and then people are taking the information and using it.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that is such a wonderful methodology and system to use.
And using it however is right for them.
Right.
I think what I like about it
Yeah.
is that there's so much information, and so each woman is able to kind of like decide what resonates with her. So
Yeah.
if our Vigo therapy resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, maybe you heard something about a nutritional approach and that really resonated with you, or maybe you just heard. I've done a few podcast episodes on the emotional aspects and emotional blocks and healing, and that's not for everybody, right? And but for some listeners, it really resonates with them, and so I really try not to just stick with one modality. I try to present a variety so that each woman can listen and find whatever resonates with her. So
yeah, so no, I definitely challenge your listeners to kind of chart their own course, right? Because you've provided a good wealth of and a good variation of knowledge, and for them to comment. Let's build up more on the comments and hear some of those stories. Stories are important because the more stories that you hear, it allows you to grab more info to provide to people, because I believe that we're all connected in some shape or form. And just by hearing some of those stories that you were telling me, I'm sure there's thousands of other people that share the same experience.
Yeah.
And for you to grab the information and put it online, and then for someone to have that also eureka moment to be like, oh my gosh, they're actually talking about this. I'm going through this. Must be amazing. Must be truly amazing. So with all that being said, this was a slice.
Well, thank you for jumping on and interviewing me. I didn't just want to sit here alone on the microphone and try to talk about the past year. So hopefully you enjoyed this mishmash of an episode. Got to know a little bit more about me. Got to hear me ramble on a lot more than I usually do in the episodes, because it's usually not about me. It's usually just about the information. But I did want to share a little bit with all of my loyal listeners who've been listening for the past year, so that you can learn a little bit more about me, hear a little bit more about what we're about, what's going on behind the scenes, and, a little bit of what's to come. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you, John, for hanging out with me tonight.
Yes, and hopefully we could start uploading some videos to your webpage.
I know you're all about these. I don't know about this video.
That would be great.
Thing.
Videos would be great, and maybe we could find some stuff on that vaginal steaming. The guys would love that.
Oh, come on. Right. So yeah, we won't be doing any video of the vaginal steaming, but thank you for your suggestion.
No worries. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's show, a little bit different of an episode today. So head over to the show notes page and let me know what you found most helpful, or if you found anything interesting or funny, or if you like this episode, if you want more of this type of episode. So you can head over to the show notes page, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/57. So the number 57. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. You can find me on Twitter at fertilefriday. And of course, if you want to learn more about the fertility awareness method, head over to fertilityfriday.com/community, and you'll be redirected to the Fertility Friday Fertility Awareness Facebook group. If you've been enjoying the podcast and you've been listening and supporting the show and you enjoy what you hear and it's been helping you, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. Also, if you have an idea for a podcast episode, if you have a guest suggestion, or if there's something that you want to hear on the show, shoot me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com and I will see what I can do. And again, I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast. I appreciate the support and just the amazing feedback and everything that I've had over the past year. I love that you've all been on this fantastic journey with me, and I love that I get to share all of this wonderful information with all of you. And so just keep commenting and emailing and just letting me know how I'm doing, because it really encourages me and it helps me to, it just helps me to keep sharing this information with all of you. So thanks again. And until next time, be well and happy charting.